Righto, let's get the show on the road. Today I'm going to do a seascape based on the methods used by a number of contemporary artists: Hannah Woodman, Kurt Jackson, Donald Teskey and Janet Carr. To start with, I will show you some of the brushes I'm about to use. Ordinary so-called oil painting brushes. Please don't forget, there is no such thing as an appropriate brush for painting. The art market wants your money. They sell an acrylic painting brush, an oil painting brush, a watercolor painting brush. They're all brushes. A brush like this, a so-called oil painting brush, can be used for watercolor, acrylic, such as this. Now these, what I call my Manky brushes. I presume it's spelled M-A-N-K-Y. I have no idea. It just sounded like a good word for this type of brush. A palette knife, just an ordinary palette knife, but not. I like palette knives that have got this shape to them so that I can put my fingers under them and I'm not scraping the surface. I can pick up the paint, mix with it, but in this video I will be using the palette knife as well as an application for texture, different methods. I've had this palette knife for a long time. It's like a favourite hammer. If I lose this, there are many different sorts of palette knives, huge arrangement. This at the moment suits me. Colours. Okay, the colours are fairly limited. I'm using at this one Rowney System 3 acrylic paints. They're not the professional artist paints, but when it's dry, I guarantee most people can't know the difference or don't know the difference between expensive acrylic paints and the so-called student variety. It's a common one. Obviously, the professional paints have a greater degree of variations in colour and they do have more pigment in them. But it's the same as watercolours, which I'll go into in future videos. So the colours I've got today are white, yellow ochre, raw sienna, burnt sienna, Prussian blue, ultramarine blue, phthalo green, and it's a magenta. Okay, so I've got a number of these different artists' work. Down here I have two pictures that I got off the internet, probably Pinterest or something like that, of two pictures of waves and a rocky shoreline. I do a lot of teaching. If I turn around behind me, it's all dark. Normally there are quite a number of people watching me and asking different questions. But I do often quote Picasso. It's on the wall over there, you can't quite see it. Good artists copy, great artists steal. Nick it, right? Look at a picture, the artist you like, but don't stay on safe grounds. Look at something that challenges you. You don't actually have to like the picture, but the techniques, the application of the paint, the movement of the hand with the brush, very important. All of these are possible through practice, fail. Practice, fail better. Practice again, practice. Okay, let's get on with it. So, the first thing I'm going to do is put a sort of generalized wash of the color. These two pictures happen to be blue sky, but this one over here has got a slight sort of crimsony magenta color underneath it. I've got a hairdryer down here, some kitchen towels, and some old paint rags. Sometimes you might see me use the rag as a movement of texture to realize an accident, a happy accident. One of my favourite words, which I repeat often to people in my classes, is serendipity. but to be able to pick up what this marker's doing. When I have people in my classes and I do a big sweep of the palette knife, it takes a lot of courage to do that, but if you hesitate and do that, the marker's totally different. So, as I said, this is a Manky brush, a spritzer, okay? Spritzer. So, first off, I'm going to spritz over it quite softly, just to be able to do almost a watercolour wash. Bit of water on the brush, reach over to the crimson or the magenta, it doesn't matter. And I have a bit of tissue in my hand, which I'm now taking off here. And I'm just going to wash, sorry. A jug full of brushes just hit the deck. Okay, so I'm going to swish it through here, okay? Quite loosely. And now I've taken the paint out of the brush. I'm just going to move that across. Now I'm going to take some white acrylic, quite a big lump of it, and just push through here, right? With a Manky brush. I mean, you can use any brush, a house painting brush, which some of these were. So I've got pinned to the surface, right? Pinned the piece of paper I'm using, which I'm just about to describe. So I've done that shape. Down here there are rocks, right? I'm just going to this is the beauty of acrylic. Okay, I'm going to wash the brush and take some yellow ochre, right? And I'm going to pick up the spritzer. I'm going to spritz that across here. And now take the yellow ochre. There are all these rocks. So I'm just going to put the yellow ochre mushy, right? Cross up there. I'm using this, both the amount of rocks are similar. Around there, the pins. So, okay. This is Bockingford 200-pound cold pressed watercolour paper. I do a lot of demonstrations. So there's a demonstration under here and over which I've given it a coat of acrylic primer undercoat. Some people might use gesso. Acrylic primer undercoat is just as good. So while I've been talking, this is starting to dry a bit. So I'm going to take tissue over the yellow ochre and I'm just going to scrunch it in. I've sort of squashed it up and I'm just going to scrunch it in for different shapes and give it a swirl and turn through there. The pin fell out, so I'll replace that. Up in the sky here, it's starting to dry. I'm going to take the hairdryer and just dry it a bit. Okay, so that's semi-dry. I pick up a bit of tissue and I'm going to wipe off what's not dry. Make the noises. Okay, so that is now fairly dry. So we get back to the sky. So you can hear me washing the brush and I have a bit of rag in hand. And so white, the horizon line is somewhere about here. Okay, so I'm going across with white, going up into the sky. You can see that because I put water into the brush, it's semi-transparent. So now with a bit of ultramarine blue, it's a very rich, some people say cold, some, I don't listen to that really, a bit of ultramarine blue and white. Okay, so now I'm going into there, just soft. Now look, sometimes I push hard into the paper or the canvas. I do a lot of paintings on MDF. I'll show you all that later, my own work. Oh, by the way, I never demonstrate how I work in my own paintings as an aspect of demonstration. I always demonstrate how other people work, to allow other people to then form their own techniques. So a little bit more ultramarine blue. I'm going higher up into the sky. The blue is richer. Okay, so into here. Now, these pins do come out on oft occasion. So around there, up to there, around the pin. And now I'm just going to slide slowly backwards and forwards, long slopes down to the bottom, and a little bit into that white, and leaving other bits and pieces. So I've got some sort of pattern of shapes. This guy here with a little bit of the pink, and that one. So I'll leave that to dry. The horizon line. A lot of people sort of fairly unsure about horizon line. I will show you later how you can use it with masking tape. But all I'm going to do is now mix up. I want a soft horizon line. It looks like a possible summer picture, not a sharp horizon. The horizon, you can't see all of them over here, the variation of what an horizon line is, which I'll talk about later when I do drawings about perspective and so forth. So I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue, a little bit of phthalo green. Right. Now, it's soft, so I'm going to put a little bit of white into that, and a little bit more phthalo green. It's up to you, whatever colour. You know, later on I might be doing red seas, purple seas, all these things. So with a Mankey brush again, I'm just above halfway, and I press down, I look at it and pull it across. Right, and a bit of the pink comes through, which adds to it. Now that's a bit sharp, but I'll leave it for a bit. So now to that colour, put a bit more white, and mix up a little bit more of that phthalo blue, and ultramarine blue and phthalo green. I haven't done a lot of these, so excuse. I say this when I'm doing my classes as well. So this is a sort of, it's got a bit of turquoise, i.e. white, and phthalo green makes turquoise with a little bit of the blue. And I'm going to come down over these marks. The yellow ochre, sorry, it should be mostly dry. I'm just going to hit it with a hairdryer for a bit. Okay, so it's, if I scrub hard, it's going to be semi-transparent. So I want to bring this colour down. See, it's here, but it's still under the white of the waves as well. So I'm using this sideways. Now I'm going to soften it off and go out across here and leave it. See, I'm pushing the brush on its side. Down to there. I might pat it and it becomes transparent. Shows some, they might all disappear in the late, I have no idea. So, the dark waves coming in. So I'm going to take some Prussian blue, it's a different blue. People talk about hot and cold blues. It's all up to you. It's all subjective. What you like, give it a go with. Right. So I've got a different blue. So these waves, don't know if you can see there, there's a dark, as a wave comes over, the light affects it. As it comes over and reaches up, like my hand, it goes into shadow. So I'm going to take one of these and move it across. Give a little bit of a wiggle and go back. And now I'm going to bring a little bit of this dark colour into the foreground and mush this across. So I'm rolling the brush. I'm now sort of scratching it down on the, in this case, a bit of plastic. So I push it across, right, and it sort of scratches into the wet paint underneath and so forth. You see the texture, it's all about texture, the marks. So if I take that out, take a bit of tissue and touch it and wipe it through. It's like a glaze. So I've already got a lovely texture there, a little bit more. So now I want to soften the horizon. It's almost dry. So I take a damp brush, see that, take the water out on the towel. I'm just going to go across it to soften the horizon. And then I'm going to go up to it and soften. Okay, just pull it across and soften it. You can do it with your fingers and just pull it across so you get a sort of a faint horizon mark. Okay, so I'm going to put a headland rock up here. So I'll do that with a palette knife. Okay, this this palette knife. It's a grey colour. It's colour subjective. Later on I'll be doing red rocks, purple rocks, all of that. So I've got this colour here. I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna, mix that into this with a palette knife. I like the sound of a palette knife. So I've got this colour here. Now, how big I do the headland doesn't really matter. So I'm going to say it's about here. So I'm going to take the palette knife and go up and turn it round and press in. It will make rock shapes with a colour that's still wet. So I take the edge of the and pull it down. It's rough. Go out. Now I pick up a little bit more, a little bit of ultramarine blue, sienna. Now I haven't got black, but Prussian blue, phthalo green and sienna or crimson makes a wonderful dark. Acrylic dries darker. Okay, so here I pick the paint up there. So as Bob Ross used to say, a little roll of paint here. So that I can lead this edge. So out here I turn it and press it. Go up. I want a softer edge, so I go back and pull it off to establish. Now I'm going to mushy these shapes. And now turn the palette knife. I'm going to give it a little bit more. Maybe there's a lighter rock out there. So I scrape some of it off. I'm removing some. Now I'm going to take the Prussian blue and the sienna again. And this time I'm going to put the paint, I'm going to clean the palette knife, on this edge. So I pick it this way. So the little roll of paint is now across there instead of there. So now I go to the bottom where these dark rocks are hugging the bottom. So I put that in and it's got a bit of perspective. So I do that shape. I take a tissue, scrunch it up and just tap it a bit to get some texture on the rocks and pull it down. Okay, so I've got a shape there. Now I'm going to put some of the waves out there. What the sound is you hear is me cleaning the brush in the water. And I'm going to take this manky brush. Okay, cut to pieces, into the water, a little bit of white. I'm not using pure white yet, okay? So I'm going into the colour of the water. I hope you can see that clearly. So it's off-white, whatever colour. So I take the edge of the brush and I'm going up to the headland and I start to tap very gently and roll it and going across. Right, up, down, tap. There's a rock going to be here and then I peter that out. Now I'm going to push this manky brush, push it. Now I'm going to take a little bit more white, so it's still not totally white, and put these marks up for texture. And so I lift it up here, across there, up to there, and I'm going to have a little bit of a wave up here, so do that shape with the little ends of the manky brush. And then just a little bit more of a wave. I know there's going to be a rock here, so I can start here and roll it, lift it up, and just little tap marks to take out the water. And there are more around the edge of this rock. This one's different. I'm going to put another wave there. So I take the paint on there and very gently, look, avoid hand like heavy elephant. It's a whisper. So I take it and just lift it gently, ease the paint in. And I take my finger and smudge some, or the edge of my finger. Some people probably don't use that because they're afraid of whatever contamination from the acrylic paint. I myself have never used gloves. Some people do. So I've cleaned the brush. I'm now going to do with a palette knife. I'm going to put a bit of crimson into there and a smidgen of white. It's a little bit further away, and I'm going to lift up a rock here. So where I've put that, and just lift up with a palette knife, turn it round, use the edge of it, pull it down in front, tap it a bit, just to get these shapes of that rock. And there are a couple of others. So I put one up, I take the palette knife, I'm going to put the paint on the this side of the palette knife and lift it up. So I press it and lift it up. Boom. A little bit darker rock. So I take the paint out on the towel and just press it a bit. There's another one there. And out here, the water's now, I'm going to take a roll of paint on my palette knife. There. Lift it up, tap it, not too much. And I want some white over here. My knife is getting in. I have to lift this palette up for the viewfinder to pick it up. So I'm going to tap white. And now go back with the palette knife up to the edge of the rock. It's going up the rock. So now I take the palette knife, turn it that way and put some little splashy bits. Now I'm going back to a little bit of ultramarine blue. Mix that with a little bit of the green. It's a bit dirty, doesn't matter. And a little bit more blue. And a little bit of Prussian blue. Just want it dark. Is always aware of how dark the paint dries. That's it. So now with a decent amount of paint, I'm going to scissor across here, pushing the palette knife backwards and forwards, and then scrape it and tap it. A little bit of white. It's a little bit lighter in front of these rocks. So I tap the palette knife, move it, pull it, and now a little bit more white into it for texture. So I tap it round here, just tapping the palette knife for the movement of the waves. A bit more. Right, so I'm tapping and pull it, tap, lift it up. There. So I've got, I love the clarity of acrylic with this immediate sort of working. So because I'm going to hit this palette, I've lifted it up. I'm going to turn the palette knife this way and start across. So pull some shapes, a bit of movement. Now I take the palette knife, hit it, press it for texture, different shapes across there. So I've got a few of the distant waves, tap it or use your fingers, and that makes the shape of the waves coming in. This is almost dry here, so I want a bit of dark in that, a bit of Prussian blue, and a bit of burnt sienna. That noise again, and I want some dark on these rocks. So take the roll of paint there, pick it up, take the edge of the palette knife and scissor it down for the edge of these rocks. Touch it, lift it up. Take it on the other side, lift the dark up here. Tap it. Texture on rocks. A little bit darker, a little bit more blue. Some cracks in the rocks. I move the palette knife down, around and tap it. It's not so dark out here, so put a little bit there, take my fingers, the edge of my finger and make some little shapes so that that little bit of water stands out. So I'm going to put this photograph, I'm transferring it now to this photograph, right? I want to put a roll of waves coming here. So I'm going back to the Mankey brush, a little bit of ultramarine. I do apologise sometimes if I call them the different colours. Maybe I'll say ultramarine with phthalo blue or something like that, but I'll show you more about that later. So, a little bit of phthalo. So it's a bit softer here, so I'm going across a little bit more white into there and pull it and tap it. So I tap this brush. Now as I'm tapping it, look, there's a lighter colour on that side and it's darker there. So I can sort of roll it over to pick up different textural marks from the different colours. So I start maybe a little bit more white, tap it, push it, turn it over, tap it, pull it. It's rough water. So now I turn that onto the side and move that. Now I'm going to put a bit more turquoise, so hence more phthalo green, a little bit of white, and tap it over the top of this. A little bit more white. Don't forget it dries darker. So down here I'm going to tap, move and drag a bit. Right, drag this softness. Down here is where you get the sand coming through below, affecting the colour of the water. So I'll do a few things there. Now, hear me washing the brush. A little bit of Prussian blue, ultramarine, and a little bit of phthalo. I want some darks here before I do the larger wave. Okay, so I'm going backwards and forwards like this slope, but not much. I turn it round, there's bits of blue, and I want these sort of shapes. The darker there brings out that turquoise from the reflection, the sunlight, a little bit of dark there, move that in, a little bit of blue, ultramarine into the white, scumble. It's a mark, it's a shape, you do this. That's scumbling marks through here. So I've gone down to that. Okay, let's put a big wave in. And I'm going to use, first of all, the palette knife. I don't want it totally white first, so I put white into what I've already mixed, mix it up, take the edge of the palette knife, and I'm going to go about here, right? So I start, tap it. I'm not looking at everything there, I'm using at other bits. A bit more white. How much paint you use is up to you. So I turn the palette knife on its edge and tap it and lift it up. It makes the little marks of if it's a windy day or the lovely spume. So here I'm going to put this rock. So mostly white through there, and I'm going to start here and lift it up with a palette knife. Lift it, tap it through there, tap that, and then it comes on the other side of the rock. So put a bit more white into there, tap it, pull it, marks in there, go back there. I've just dropped my towel. This rock, I'm going to start off with raw sienna and a little bit of burnt sienna, and I'm going to scissor. It's a fairly sharp, so I'm going to scissor this colour through there. The wave is behind. I'm not pressing too hard. A little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of Prussian blue. There are dark bits, so I use the edge of the palette knife to make shapes in the rocks. So all I want to first is just get a little bit of dark in there. How much? A little bit more, a little bit of crimson in there. Why not? So the rock goes past there, press it in. So I'll leave that now. That's the general shape. I want a bit of water in the front. I'm going to go back to the Manky brush. So white into this that's already got a bit of blue in it, and I'm going to put a little bit of raw sienna. The sand is coming up into the beach. So I turn the brush on its side, and I want to start to do a few of the foamy bits. So I tap it, turn it over. Next time I do this, I'm going to have a little bit of between there. So I'm going to put now, I'm going to take a bit more white, and I'm going to tap it across here and just tap it. Don't do the same marks. Don't repeat them. Try and vary the marks. So I do that, turn it over and do a little wiggle. This is just a little bit of foam here, through there, maybe there's a little bit there, and into there. See, it's off-white at the moment. But I want little bits of dark wave in amongst it. So I just wipe the paint off on here. Little bit of Prussian blue and magenta and a little bit of ultramarine. So now with the Manky, you'll see all these benefits later. So I take that and I start to just sort of leave these little marks into the waves, right, and into there. It adds different colours. And then I go across. Now down here I'm going to do these dark rocks, and I want a little bit more of the lovely sort of warm turquoise with the sand. So there's the turquoise over there. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre, a bit more white. If you can hear people talking in the background, just a couple of friends there's a lovely view. I'll show you all about the studio later. So with that, I'm just going to press over this. It's a bit too dark. I'm going to add a little bit more white. Keep remembering, acrylic dries darker. So I'm going to, look, you can still see this yellow ochre coming through there. So I tap, move it up against here. I'm filling in some of the white from the paper, coming over there, little marks. Take the old towel and tap it, pull it down for texture into there. So I've got the base. I'll come back to that rock later as it dries, okay? I'm going to have a little bit of water going past there, I've just decided. So look, this is acrylic, it's movable, dries quicker. So I'm going to add some cobalt blue to there and just mush this in across, leaving some little bits of the white of the paper, the little bit of yellow ochre coming through. So I'm merging into that, down into there, a little bit of white, into that colour, a little bit of phthalo green, a little bit of yellow ochre, not much, it's already there. So I'm going to put some marks with a brush across, sort of into there, marks. So these shapes, but don't try, I do turn the brush quite often. I don't always mention it because I do it unconsciously for the marks that it makes. So now I'm down to here. So cleaning the brush, the main key brush, I'm going to go to the darkest colour, Prussian blue, phthalo green, and magenta. Right, you don't, well, I use black a lot in my own painting, so look, got a lot of paint, and you decide, I decide where I'm going to put this rock. So about here, I'm going to start and push into this. It's always difficult sometimes if you like the part that you've painted, but you have to get rid of it for whatever follows. See, that's a blue. I'm going to add a little bit more magenta. Yeah, that. So now I'm just going to do the shape, or roughly the shape there, and out into there, and the perspective. So, mushy, mushy. Across there, and into there, where this wave is coming in. It won't take long to dry. Now over here, a little bit more of that, some sienna, and I want to press in a rock, sort of in a line through there. So I'm going to paint in a rock shape there, and into there, now here. Okay, now here, the rocks, but first of all, the wave that's coming in between, I'm going to take that out a little bit. It's just a bit too much in line with that. I don't know, it just seems a sensible thing to do. So I'm going to lift it up there and see, I'm rolling it. Look, I'm rolling the brush and then pulling it down and and there's a perspective right through there. Put that into there. Now I want this wave coming across here, hitting that little bit of rock. So, and that's from this picture. So I've done some of that and that. So now I take the palette knife, off-white, which is there, and I want mushy mushy. I don't know, it's just a name I use. So I'm going to put the palette knife, again, there's the little roll of paint there. So I'm going to pull it, not too hard. Look, it's a whisper, like a plane coming into land or something like that. This is still wet, so I take the palette knife and just push it. Now if I push a little bit harder, the colour underneath comes around. There's a little bit too much paint there, so I'll wipe it off, but I'm going to tap it to blend it into the rock. Now, white on the other side, so the wave is going behind there, so thick white, and I tap it a bit. How big do I want the wave? So I scratch back in, lift it up, and no real sharp, now I pull it in front, turn it there, lift it there, tap it, goes up in there. You make your idea with the splashes. This one's got a little bit of yellow ochre in it, so I'm going to scissor through there. Up into there, lift it up a bit. Now a bit more white, into there, a little bit heavier, I press, turn the palette knife. Now I can scrape some off to show the texture of the waves and the colour underneath. Drag it. See, I've removed some of the paint. Now behind, it's going to rock there. So now with a bit of white, the wave splashing through. I have definitely got to move this a bit. I don't know if you can see all the palette. So I now take that and pull it through. Look at that mark. Look at it. So I do it there and pull it across. Okay? Now this wave is going up to there. I touch it. It's in between there. Now I touch it up for little bits of it. And there's a dribble coming over this rock. So I touch it and pull it, take the paint off and blend it in. So it makes all these marks and shapes. And down here, it's a bit frothy. Excuse me, I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to move my water and just pull it across. I think I'll take the pin out, do that, and pull it across. Scumble, look, please, very lightly. And I'm just going to go. Lovely textural marks. And start there. We'll go back. A little bit whiter and give it a zigzag. Shapes of the waves going through. I'll come back to these rocks later. So there are all these rocks here. Okay, now I'm going to do splattering, scraping, mark making. I'm going to slightly dry this first. Okay, so it doesn't really matter underneath here. I'm going to take a bit of tissue paper. I know there may be a shortage of tissue paper, but I'm just gently going to lay it across here, very gently, okay, there. So now I want to splatter. So I take my manky brush. Hey, dark first, right? So I've already got the dark I used up here, so I'm going to take it. I'm going to put a little bit more sienna, a little bit more of the magenta. Some people may like this. You can wear gloves. There are many people use a toothbrush or something. So I've got this manky brush, dip it into the water, and I'm just going, don't do this way. And if you're doing it at home, put something on the floor. So I'm just going to splatter. So all I'm doing is pushing this through this way, okay, for this method. I'll show you later different aspects of splattering and smearing and picking up texturalization, if that's a proper word. So I'm just going to do this, right? Boom, boom, boom. And hence the tissue there. Now I'm going to change the color and it'll put a bit more burnt sienna. You can vary it, so I'm splattering. Up and down, this way. Don't just go across repetitively the same marks. Think about variation. Most of these are going to be hidden, but you never know. Right? So, a bit more. Boom, 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 boom. Marks. That's what these are. Textural marks. Up and down. More. Now, I've washed the brush. I'm going to take a little bit watery, bit more water into it. Prussian blue. It's a little bit more watery. So, they're going to be bigger blobs. See? Big blobs. Boom, 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 big blobs. There. So I now take the tissue off. So I have texture there. So, and you can see the splattering. That's why if you're doing it at home, make sure you guard something. So now I'm going to put in, with the manky brush, some of these lighter rocks here. So, bit of white, bit of yellow ochre, wonderful colour. Yellow ochre and white. So I'm going to put that in front. I'm just going to test it first. That's not bad. So now I want to lift this rock up. That's why I painted these waves first, so the rock is in front. So I pick it up and do the shape with this brush. Roll it. And then turn it round into there. And that pushes that wave behind, down into there. I'm going to put a little bit more yellow ochre, a richer colour, and maybe a little bit of raw sienna. So there's another rock here. So I take that shape into there, down to where the pin was. Now, I might as well put some texture onto that. So I've got the Prussian blue into there. And why not a little bit of the crimson, a dark. So I'm going to put some dark marks on these rocks. Look how it splits up. So I'm going to take the edge of it and make these shapes. Turn it round. Look at the texture, the shapes. You'll find someday you do it and there's somebody staring back at you because you've made a face in the rocks. We all hopefully look at clouds, trees, rock surfaces. So it's a little bit darker, right? I've just done a little bit of Prussian blue, crimson and sienna, and now I'm going to do the dark side. The sun is coming from here, hence this is dark, this is light, with a dark side on those rocks. So a bit a little darker on this brush. I can do it with a palette knife, doesn't matter. So I'm just using the edge, these little lumpy bits of paint. So I'm putting some corners and I turn it, roll it. Look, that's how light I'm holding it. So I turn it round again, just sort of coaxing it into textural shapes of rocks. Little marks, there's a crack. So I turn them, mark around, put a shape. Look at that light on there already. I'll go back to that. So this is starting to dry up here. So I'm going to take the palette knife, and the sunlight is hitting parts of these rocks. So in this photograph, there's a sort of light yellowy, ochre-y, grey-y, whatever colour-y. I'm going to use a little bit of white up to this. Don't know if you can see it. A little bit of the magenta-y colour. All these paints have different names. Some of what I call purple is totally different name. So it's a magenta-y whatever colour. You experiment. You use colours you like. I remember a long time ago, when I'm from New Zealand, by the way, I'd come home from here in the UK, back to New Zealand. When I was a youngster, I painted very realistic representational paintings. I'll show you what I do now in later videos. But I read the books, or some not, I'd tell a lie, I don't think I ever read a book on how to paint all the way through, took snippets, nicked some ideas and used that. But colour, as I'm trying to get, is totally and utterly subjective. If you put a colour down and you're somebody nearest and dearest or a friend comes over and says, "Oh, I don't like that colour," it's up to you. What have they got to do with it? Have confidence. Right, that colour. So on this rock here, there's sunlight. So I'm going to take the palette knife and move it over, down to there, up to there, over the edge of it. So I take the edge and roll it down. Now there's some more. There's a great wodge of light. There's a bit of white came into there. So a little bit more of that, a mark. Look at the shape, little bits of light coming down there and maybe on the top of that. And I mush it round. Now I'm going to scrape it off a bit, right? Scrape back for texture. Scrape it back. In there, scrape it back. Marks up there. Now I start to move. I haven't finished. This is going to be a lot darker. This is the light. Now I'm going to put a bit of the yellow ochre and white. White and yellow ochre. Right, for some other. And so I take the roll of paint on the edge of the palette knife, come up to here, and just across. And little dobs of that. Up there, little mark. Maybe over there, a little bit. Use the edge of it. A little bit lighter there. Press it. Mush. Now I'll leave that. Right, so in here, all these rocks. Manky brush. Look, I don't know if you can see there, Kurt Jackson, blobs of paint, mushy mush paint, pushing it across. Donald Teskey, more relative to the colours, etc. And here, loads of rocks. So I'm going to start off with a sort of warmy, browny colour. So a little bit of burnt sienna. raw sienna, okay, with a little bit of ultramarine blue, bit of water, and this brush. See, I know hopefully what's going to happen. So all I'm going to do is do blobs of this around it. It's still wet. I can smear some of these shapes. So I'm turning it round. Okay, I'm turning the brush. I'm not doing the same mark. I turn it round. Okay, this is still wet. So I turn that round, do these shapes. The rocks are smaller as it goes out towards the water. So I want little, smaller marks. Whoops, there's a big mark, but I'll cover that over. So I'm now going up to the side of this rock, and with that I'm going to lead up to there with the brush strokes. This is a bit more of a solid rock, so I turn the brush around. There, move that into there, a blob there, spotty bit there, up to here, a little bit darker there, there's a different side of a rock, few marks there, a little bit here, blob, blob, blob. So these, in a way, are the undercoat. I say many times to people, what's underneath is just as important as what's on top. And patience and practice. I've just got a brush that almost fell off the table. 2 ordinary oil painting brushes. So I am now going to put some dark into here. Right, Prussian blue, take the rag off, Prussian blue, burnt sienna and phthalo green, depending on which colour. So over here I'm now going to finish off this rock. Well, I'm going to do some splattering so it's darker. So I look at the shapes, a little bit of dark there, mark there, roll the brush up into there. This is dark, so I go back up and turn the brush over, back to that dark, and here into that little bit of breaking wave, and just pull it, a little bit of dark there, and in here. I'm sort of doing blobby bits of these different colours. There's dark here, and acrylic dries darker. So this will dry quite dark, what a terrible thing to say. Okay, dark here, and now with this, I'm going to bring out the edges of some of these rocks. I'll talk later about perspective and so forth. By the way, this is my first video doing this. I don't know whether I should have said that. So I'm taking the brush and just go up. Look, it's just balanced in my hands. So I want some of these other colours, so I'm tapping the brush, holding it this way, a little bit of colour, gently, a whisper. Now over here, I want to darken this rock, edge there, down to there, and a tap of dark there. Now I'm going out to the rock in the water, so I'm adding a little bit of sienna to it, so it's not so dark. And take the edge of it, pull it round, and down there, up to the edge, a little bit of soft mark, make some shapes with it, make some shapes. And a little bit of Prussian blue at the bottom, tap it, lift it up, tap it for the shape. You could take the palette knife, where do I put it? There. And just move gently some of these things around, just the shape, use the edge, tap it, lift it off. Look at that texture, there. Okay, so maybe my finger, and just tap that, the marks. Right, down to these rocks. Brush, light, right, light. So, white, sienna, ochre, mid-tone. So I'm going to tap. I'll see what this is like first. So it doesn't matter, I'm doing these shapes. Because of time, I'll do a few larger ones. So I'm just going to tap that into there. That's all right. So I turn the brush from that way to this way. Okay? So I was doing most of the painting this way. Now I'm turning the brush this way. So little ones out here, and I'm going to start to tap in these shapes. Turn the brush over, not doing the same mark. There, tap in amongst these splattering. Now a bit more sienna, and a richer colour. So a rock here sticking up. That paint's quite thick, it's all right. Tap, tap. Now over here, turn the brush over. I don't want white yet. Tap, tap, tap. Leaving some of these splatter marks. A mark. There's a bigger rock here. Right, so here they become bigger rocks. So I want some light first. Tap, 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 tap. Turn it over. Different mark. Tap, 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 tap. And a little scumble mark. Bit more white. Bit more sienna. So I've got a bit of dark there. I want a bit of light on that rock. A little bit of yellow ochre into it. Tap it. Move away from it. Don't try too hard. Because it's the overall look. There are people, I mean, I used to spend a long time on a rock just to get the rock looking like a rock. So I tap in there, turn it over. And the little splattering bits are still coming through. Tap it. Down here, a little bit of the blue, maybe a little bit of grey. So all you need to do is mix blue with that and a grey rock. It's dark first, right? And into here, tap it, turn it round. How much you do? A little bit of light now. You can see when the light goes that the rocks look with the sunlight. So I'm going to clean the brush, take up the palette knife, and I'm going to put light on the rocks. Noise, maybe a little bit of that magenta in there, a bit of white. So, take the general side of it, and I'm going to put, I want to test it first, little bits of light on the end of this. So I just pull it through, that's it. Don't want to put it in the place that it says there. So that's the colour I want. So I do some little dots, I want it light in front. And it gets bigger here, so there's a bigger rock there. Turn it over, put little scratchy marks with it. There, touch it, merge it round. And this bigger rock, so I take it light, I want to put some light on this rock, this side, if you can see it there. So I take the roll of paint and just pull it across. Up there, and another one. Mark. Little bits of yellow ochre and sienna. And tap over these. Scrape it. Little marks. Now, look, my finger. They're already cut in paint. So, into the white acrylic, into the sienna, into there. So I've got paint. So I'm just going to take my finger and put little marks. Look at Dago, all the little blobs of his fingers. Don't do the same one. I turn it round this way. Blobs. Use the edge. Little marks. Now a little bit of dark. Blue, that, so I've got darks here. There are darks in here. So in between there's a dark. A little bit more sienna and that. So maybe the dark in there. Look, that colour. And a little bit of these darks again in there. Maybe there's a dark there. Goes across. Fingerprints. There, there, there. Scratch it with your fingernail. My wonderful shapes. When I do the watercolours, you'll see me use the fingernails a lot. I'm going to leave that to dry a bit. And put some light on these rocks, using this brush, bit of white into the colour that I've already got there. Sienna, yellow ochre and white. Test it. So this is semi-dry, so I'm going to scumble across. A little bit more yellow ochre and sienna. Tap it. That's it. Roll it. Go around some of those cracks. Tap it. Down there, a little bit more white on this one out here. Not pure white, just a little bit of white. Tap it. highlights, a little bit more white, tap it, little bits there, tap it, lose some of the edges. Edges don't always have to be sharp or soft anyway. So turn the brush around, a little bit of dark, some rocks just there. You can see all the little splatter marks. I put some darks, marks there, a few there. Now, as it's drying back here, take the palette knife, white, okay, white. Clean the palette knife, push that away, take the roll of paint on the palette knife, select the area where you want white, okay? So I'm going to scissor it across here. So a tap, and press, and push. And then these little currents of foam. So I'm doing the side, little pushy marks. They deposit small marks here, this wave where it was before off-white. Now with the white, it's still semi-wet. I press into it and lift it up. And I want it behind that rock. So I take the edge of the palette knife up to that rock and lift up this foam. Drag it down, touch it, lift it, or your fingers, scratch it with your fingernails. The light, this is about light, this painting. So I edge again and I lift it up a little bit and pull it down. Now I'm lifting it up. I don't want to cover all those colours underneath. They add depth. So a little bit more, this wave here. So I'm going to take the palette knife this time, like as I did before, to paint on that side so I can lift up. I'm right-handed, left-handers do differently. I want to go up to the rock here, round it and lift it up. And now turn it and lift up this rock, lift up the wave of rock. So I press into it, leaving a little bit of shadow there because it's the direction of the sun. So I'm not going to do too much, just a little bit of white, maybe a bit out there, touch that, to give the impression of waves coming in. So down here, this is this one, a little bit of white on there, and I want to push down with the white. Look at that mark there, with the others bit, doesn't matter with a little bit of the colour, the waves have sand in them, right? That colour, a little bit more white. It's that contrast between the early colour that wasn't quite white to now the white. So I turn it and pull it. Tap. I want a little bit of rough water there, so I take that and lift it up. Turn it. In front of the colour of the rock. You can see the turquoise coming through, etc. Out here, way out there, further out, a little bit of white. So I take the palette knife there and tap it. Whoops, didn't work. Doesn't matter. There it is. Turn it round and make these shapes. Tap it, lift it up. Look at that against that. Wonderful. So a little bit of white. You can pick up a smidgen of white on a palette knife. So out there, pull it. And here. And I'm going to put a little sliver, small bit of froth foam. So I've got it there and I want to scissor that across. Little bits. Up above that dark, pull it back, tap it. Push it. A little bit of foam there. So the difference down here now, I'm going to put a little bit of sienna into the white and tap down here. This is in shadow, so I'm going to put that one out there. It's quite abstract. All painting is abstract. In there, up there. A little bit of white where the sun may be just going over the top of that. Do that, take my finger or my fingernail and scratch a few marks there. A little bit of white there on that rock. Drag this down the face for texture. Scrape it back. Scrape that back for light on that rock. Sunlight on there. Marks with a palette knife. shapes, pat it, move it. Maybe scrape off. You can remove it if it doesn't. Yeah, a little bit came off there, gave a little bit of seeing through the wave, a little bit of spotty bit there, rough it up a bit. So that, shapes. I quite like that sky. Could put another bit of blue over it, but I like the pinky colour coming through with the green, the shapes there, the dark. You can see those first marks that go across it. I'm going to take a little bit more white into that mauvey turquoisey colour. I hate all these names for colours. So I'm going to scissor across here, tap it, and there's little waves coming in on the beach, so I'm going over some of those rocks. Now I take a little bit of white and just tap it over the top very gently. That's a bit too much, so I scrape the rock back, press it into here, up into that to give the shape. The intention of not being overworked. That's always a difficult. Well, I've been accused of overworking paintings many times. So I'm going to pull down a dark here and pull that in. It's still wet. Scrape it for texture. Maybe that goes there. Maybe there's a crack up that rock. So I use the edge of the palette knife to make marks, shapes. Maybe that rock's got a bit of a dark crack going through it. So I use the edge of the palette knife, turn it round, go up and then down into the shadow again. Little bit of more sienna, burnt sienna and raw sienna. Little marks now over this. Anything to add variation, right? Change. I'll talk about all that later. Little marks. Now almost white on the rocks down here, little blobs of it, right? Little blobs of highlights on these rocks. That's not white enough. So it's a painting. There's nothing wrong with trying to draw every rock if you want to. Little spots of light. Watch the direction. Okay, I'm going to paint in a few shadows and I'll look at it to see how it is. Okay, so here there's a bigger rock. So I've got that. I'm going to go around the edge of it with a brush and paint a few shadow, little blobs of dark here and there. Bit of sienna, a few blobs down here, blob it with that, hit it, boom, boom. There's many textures for that, for all these rocks, for the shapes and marks, even the edge, the back of a brush. Look at that scrape mark, marks, tap it. I mean, look at that mark, round, turn it, shapes, round there, up there, scratch mark, texture, shapes. And lastly now, the white water coming in amongst the rocks, so quite a bit of white. So look, brush just gentle in my hand. So I want it around that rock, so do that. The other side of that rock, in there, up there, a few little marks, up here into the shadow. Maybe I'll push that up. A few little dots of the white there, and a little bit across there. This is fairly thick paint. A few little dots of white, turn the brush over, scratch bits, scratch shapes. And the artists that I was talking about use all these shapes, all these marks. Donald Teskey, Janet Kerr, Kurt Jackson, Hannah Woodman, who was influenced by Joan Erdley. Virtually every contemporary artist has been influenced or copied or nicked, pinched, purloined methods from other artists that they like. But don't forget, right, you don't always have to like an artist's painting to see ideas. Okay, I think that's about it for the first ever video. So I'll step back and look at it in the light. And that'll do. Thank you. Okay, so now you're looking at the completed painting. I've mounted it onto the bit of sugar paper to see how it sort of fits the edges and so forth. I'm happy with it. I'm going to go over what I've actually used from the Bockingford paper. It's the 200-pound weight, or 425 grams. This is half a sheet of the full sheet. It's not surface. You get the three surfaces in watercolor paper: hot pressed, cold pressed, and rough. Now, for some reason in England, cold pressed watercolor paper is called not. No idea why, but that's a fact. So this half a sheet, I cut it to whatever compositional aspect I want. And as I said at the beginning of the video, underneath here, because I do a lot of demonstrations when all the people in the classes, that I often paint over them and do another demonstration on top. So I gave the old demonstration a couple of coats, or one coat, doesn't matter, of acrylic primer undercoat, and from there. So I will talk later in other videos from your comments, if you like it, and obviously to subscribe. I will do little smaller videos on the equipment, etc. that I use. So I started off with the magenta, the white, mixed it in, the horizon line. I didn't do any drawing, there's nothing wrong with drawing, and the equipment, the palette knife, the marks that a palette knife makes, this or this, so forth, scratching back. Now, the little bit of the magenta with a slight bit of the blue gives it a bit of mauve. That's why I put this sort of mauvey grey light on these rocks, sort of harmony. The little splattering, I will do a lot more splattering, but you can see the initial coat of the yellow ochre. It's still coming out through there in bits and pieces, gives the idea of the transparency of the water, and all the little splattering and marks. I could have carried on more, made more fingerprints and so forth, but later on. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If I've missed anything out, please let me know. So it's, again, it's all subjective. I mean, look at the scratching back there of me with a palette knife, of scratching back the damp paint to give these colours of the sky, whether you call it reflecting, I just call it becomes part of the whole thing, this little bit of pink there, and these other colours that come through it. Okay, so I think that's the end of it. Before the reference material of these artists, okay, with the two photographs that I selected. I got all these off the net. Sometimes when you print them out, they're whatever comes out with these printers, but you can see the relationship that I used in the marks of the waves here or here. Kurt Jackson does a lot of splattering, Janet Kerr uses palette knife and brush, and Donald Teskey uses a lot of darks and then the blues over the top and so forth. So that I've always said, what you like, copy it. Copy it again. If you like the style, gradually, the more you do it, you will develop a style. Oh, that's what it's called. Okay, I think that'll do. Again, I hope you've enjoyed it. That'll do. Thank you.